Mantras of the Divine Mother, date 22nd November. Our Divine Mother says, at each moment may our attitude be such that the Divine will determine our choice so that the Divine may give the direction to all our life. Our Divine Mother says, with my blessing, says our Mother. Words of our Divine Mother. Topic: Surrender. Our Divine Mother says surrender is the decision to hand over the responsibility of your life to the Divine. This is done either through the mind or the emotion or the life impulse or through all of them together. To surrender to the Divine is to renounce your narrow limits and let yourself be invaded by it and made a center for its play. If you are truly surrendered to the Divine in the right manner and totally, then at every moment you will be what you ought to be, you will do what you ought to do, you will know what you ought to know. But for that, you should have transcended all the limitations of the ego. True surrender enlarges you, it increases your capacity, it gives you a greater measure in quality and in quantity which you could not have had yourself. Detailed surrender is a surrender which does not forget anything. Our Divine Mother says detailed surrender means the surrender of all the details of life, even the smallest and the most significant and the most insignificant in appearance. And this means to remember the Divine in all circumstances. Whatever we think, feel or do, we must do it for Him as a way of coming close to Him, to be more and more what He wants us to be, capable of manifesting His will in perfect sincerity and purity, to be the instruments of His love. If man surrenders totally to the Divine, he identifies himself with the Divine. Perfect surrender, the indispensable condition for identification. In the integrality and absoluteness of bhakti and surrender, we find the essential condition of perfect peace leading to the uninterrupted bliss. Our Divine Mother says the path is very long, but self-surrender makes it short. The way is difficult, but perfect trust makes it easy. Surrender to the Divine is the best emotional protection. The true repose is that of a perfect surrender to the Divine. What is the secret of success in sadhana is the question. For this our Divine Mother says surrender. Next subtopic, to will what the Divine wills. Our Divine Mother says surrender to will what the Divine wills is the supreme wisdom. To will what God wills, that is the supreme secret. Will one with the Divine will, a condition that triumphs over all obstacles. Divine will, the will expressing the highest truth. Let us do our best in all circumstances, leaving the result to the Divine's decision. We must be satisfied with what the Divine gives us and do what He wants us to do without weakness, free from useless ambition. Whenever there is any difficulty, we must always remember that we are here exclusively to accomplish the Divine's will. And when our adhesion to the Divine's will is total, then also our peace and joy becomes total. Our Divine Mother says the Divine's will is that we should be like channels, always open, always more wide, so that His forces may pour their abundance into the mold. Our will must always be a perfect expression of the Divine's will. Our constant prayer is to understand the Divine's will and to live accordingly. We must lie before the Divine, always like a page perfectly blank, so that the Divine's will may be inscribed in us without any difficulty or mixture. Our Divine Mother says, at each moment, may our attitude be such that the Divine's will determines our choice so that the Divine may give the direction to all our life. We must see only through the Divine's eyes and act through the Divine's will. We must know how to depend for everything and in everything on the Divine. He alone can surmount all difficulties. In a total surrender to the Divine, there can be no longer errors or faults or any insufficiency, since it is what the Divine has willed that He does, and it is done as the Divine has willed it. Our Divine Mother says, always the Supreme Will remains the eternal mystery, calling for all wonder and marveling. Like the child who does not reason and has no care, we trust ourselves to the Divine that the Divine's will may be done. To do at each moment the best we can and leave the result to the Divine's decision is the surest way to peace, happiness, strength, progress, and final perfection. Our Divine Mother says the only thing you have to do is to remain quiet, undisturbed, solely turned towards the Divine. The rest is in His hands. Our Divine Mother says we are always free to make our proposals to the Lord, but after all, it is only His will that is to be realized. If one looks from high enough, whatever one does, one never wastes one's time, since one acts according to one's nature and without knowing it according to the will of the Lord. Our Divine Mother says, be quiet and offer yourself calmly and confidently. All that happens is always the effect of the Supreme's will. Human action can be the occasion but never the cause. Next subtopic, difficulties of surrender. Our Divine Mother says, it is rare that somebody can surrender entirely to the Divine's will without having to face one or another of the difficulties. How many efforts and struggles again to give ourselves to surrender once the individuality is constituted. For if the struggle is not an actual one, that does not mean that it will not come one day in one form or another. For always, at least once in our life, we are placed in some circumstance to test whether we are ready for an entire surrender to the Divine's will. Whether we are, before all, human beings striving to attain and manifest the Godhead, ready to renounce everything in the world, what seems to us good as well as what seems bad, for the supreme conquest. In that ascent towards the heights, both virtues and duties, that is to say, our mental prejudices and preferences, stand far more in our way than our exterior weaknesses and faults. An error can always be used as a springboard, whilst a virtue is more often a limit, a barrier that must be surmounted. I will add, says our Divine Mother, quoting a passage of the Synthesis of Yoga, all these are within us, waiting to wall in the spirit with forms. But we must always go beyond, always renounce the lesser for the greater, the finite for the infinite. We must be prepared to proceed from illumination to illumination, from experience to experience, from soul state to soul state, so as to reach the utmost transcendence of the Divine and its utmost universality. The way in which most people surrender, let God manifest His will, but let it be the same as mine. One thing you must know and decide. It is if you want the true Divine as He is, or if you want the Divine in keeping with your own conception of what He ought to be. And if you have decided to surrender sincerely and totally to the Divine and to be and do what He wants you to be and do according to His own will, or if you want the Divine to do what you want Him to do and to act according to your own will. I have forwarded your prayer to the Supreme Lord. If you want to live in Ananda, you must not try to impose your will on the Divine, but on the contrary, you must be ready to accept all that comes to you from Him with an equal peace. He knows better than we what is good for our progress, says our Divine Mother. These are the words of our Divine Mother.